ever get that feel? You know, like the more news you read, the less you actually understand. It's like we're just drowning in information, but we're absolutely thirsting for like actual knowledge.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving into something that's both, I think, unsettling and incredibly important.
Okay.
How these narratives are being shaped, sometimes deceptively,
Right.
and what that means for all of us trying to stay informed. We're going to be unpacking a series of stories, kind of like, connecting the dots
Yeah.
to get a clearer picture of the current political and media landscape. What do you think?
Well, what I find fascinating is how these seemingly isolated incidents, when you actually examine them together,
Yeah.
they reveal this pattern of manipulating reality, often to serve very specific agendas.
Let's start with this tactic the Trump administration has been using, twisting online information,
Okay.
particularly when it comes to immigration.
Yeah.
Dara Kerr's article in The Guardian exposed how they're updating these old ICE press releases, some from like a decade ago,
Wow.
to create this illusion of mass deportations happening right now.
So it's kind of like, how does that even work?
Wow.
What are they doing?
It's clever, right? It's exploiting how search engines work.
Oh, okay.
By simply changing the dates, they can take these old press releases
Yeah.
and shoot them to the top of the search results.
Oh, wow.
And this creates the impression that this is current events.
Yeah.
And when The Guardian started asking questions about this, some of those updated dates mysteriously vanished.
Interesting.
And so they buried these stories back down the search results.
So it's not just about spreading misinformation.
Right.
It's about what? Controlling what people see.
Yeah,
It's manipulating the very tools we use to find information.
that's right. But this also plays into a much bigger strategy, don't you think?
Totally.
It's like this idea of using fear, especially around immigration,
Yeah,
to rally a specific base.
absolutely. It's a classic tactic. Yep. Dividing people, creating this us versus them mentality,
Yeah.
where the government is portrayed as either the savior or the enemy.
And this leads us right into the Media ecosystem
Well,
and the spread of disinformation.
uh-huh.
Brian Stelter has been reporting on some of the more outrageous claims circulating among Trump supporters. And frankly, some of this stuff is just wild.
Look what, give me an example.
Oh, there's so many.
Okay.
Like the allegation that USAID spent $100 million on condoms for Hamas,
No.
or blaming diversity initiatives for that recent fatal midair collision.
Wait, diversity initiatives are responsible for a plane crash?
That's what they're saying.
Wow.
That's a pretty serious accusation to just throw around.
That's a big one.
Yeah. And then there's the claim that CBS defrauded the public by editing the Kamala Harris 60 Minutes interview,
Oh, right.
which led to Trump's call to terminate the entire network
Wow.
and just completely disregarding the First Amendment's protection of the press.
It seems like a pattern. Attacking any media outlet that presents information that contradicts their specific narrative.
That's it.
But even just discussing these claims,
Yeah,
it feels risky, doesn't it?
I know.
Like we're giving them oxygen.
That's my worry. Are we just amplifying these things by talking about them?
Well, it's a valid concern,
Yeah.
but I think ignoring them actually allows these narratives to fester and spread unchecked.
Okay.
So by addressing them head on, I think we can actually dissect the tactics being used
Yeah.
and help people recognize them in the future.
Okay, so shining a light on the absurd can actually be a way to fight back against disinformation.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of tactics, let's talk about the Politico scandal.
Okay.
This claim, amplified by people like Elon Musk, that USI secretly funneled $8 million to Politico.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
This is a prime example, I think,
Yeah.
of how a grain of truth can be twisted into a weapon of disinformation.
Okay.
That $8 million actually represents subscriptions to Politico Pro,
Oh, okay.
a service that's used by government agencies,
Right.
something many organizations do.
Mm-hmm.
Politico's CEO even issued a statement emphasizing their financial independence and that they've never received any government subsidies.
So it's basically a business transaction.
It is.
Like subscribing to any specialized publication.
Exactly.
But the way it was spun, it painted this picture of Politico as some kind of puppet of the government.
Right.
Isn't that the goal here?
Yeah.
To erode trust in legitimate sources of information.
I think you're seeing a very deliberate strategy here.
Mm-hmm.
You create a false narrative, amplify it using these influential figures,
Yeah.
and then you discredit any legitimate source that tries to debunk it.
Right.
This is how they control the information flow.
And the irony is,
What's that?
Representative Lauren Boebert, who was pushing this lie,
Right.
actually has her office subscribed to Politico Pro.
Oh, the hypocrisy.
I know.
Wow.
But this Politico incident isn't an isolated event. This blatant falsehood about the Panama Canal,
Yeah.
where the State Department claimed Panama was letting U.S. ships pass for free,
Right.
fits right into this pattern.
Yes. The Panamanian president,
Yeah.
Jose Raul Mulino, immediately called them out,
He did.
publicly stating that he didn't even have the authority to waive those fees.
Imagine the diplomatic fallout from spreading such obvious lies.
Right.
It really makes you question the motives
Yeah.
behind such a bold-faced fabrication.
And this points to another concerning trend, I think, that we're seeing.
Okay.
This need to manufacture wins, even if they're based on complete fabrications,
Yeah.
as we saw with Trump's declaration at the National Prayer Breakfast.
You mean the water that was actually intended for irrigation and wouldn't have even reached the LA fires, which, by the way, were already under control?
Precisely.
Right.
But it made for a good story, you know?
Of course.
Decisive leader taking action.
Yeah.
Even though California farmers who depend on that water were left wondering, like, what's going on?
Right, yeah.
Brian Stelter even brought up that New York Times quote
Uh-huh.
about Trump viewing each day as a TV episode
Right.
where he has to vanquish his rivals.
Imagine the implications.
Yeah.
If this approach to governance becomes the norm,
Totally.
how do you make informed decisions?
Right.
When the information itself is constantly being manipulated?
It's a good question.
And what happens when those fabrications have real-world consequences?
Yeah.
Like disrupting crucial water resources?
This focus on performative victories over actual solutions
Yes.
is incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
It creates this climate where facts become irrelevant.
Right.
And the only thing that matters is the narrative.
Regardless of its connection to reality.
Exactly.
And speaking of dangerous,
Yeah.
let's not forget about the dismantling of those safeguards that are meant to protect us from foreign influence.
Yeah.
Pam Bondi's appointment as Attorney General, yeah, and her subsequent actions are particularly worrisome to me.
Like, what are you thinking of?
Well, her decision to disband the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force,
Uh-huh.
coupled with cutting back enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act,
Right.
is incredibly short-sighted.
Especially considering Russia's interference in the 2016 election.
Exactly.
And Paul Manafort's conviction for violating Fair Eye.
So we're basically becoming more vulnerable to the very thing that helped put this administration in power.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
It's like they're rolling out the red carpet
Yeah.
for foreign actors to meddle in our affairs.
Mm-hmm.
A former national security prosecutor, Aaron Zelinsky, even issued a warning
Yeah.
that these changes are an open invitation for more interference.
And then there's the assault on USAID,
Right.
an organization that's been instrumental in promoting democracy and providing humanitarian aid around the world.
Yeah.
The Trump administration's efforts to freeze payments to USAID, despite claiming it was part of a general treasury review, seem pretty suspect to me.
Yeah.
What are the long-term consequences
Yeah.
of dismantling an organization like that?
The consequences are far-reaching.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking billions of dollars
Yeah.
lost by American farmers and businesses who relied on USAID programs, as Daniel Wu pointed out.
Right.
But more importantly,
Yeah.
it creates a vacuum
Yeah.
for other global powers like China to step in and exert their influence.
So we lose out on economic opportunities.
Yeah,
And cede ground to our rivals on the global stage.
exactly.
Talk about a double whammy. The fact that authoritarian leaders are praising the dismantling of an organization that promoted democracy, it's pretty telling, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a chilling reminder, I think,
Yeah.
that the enemies of democracy often cheer when we weaken our own institutions.
And speaking of questionable figures, where does Elon Musk fit into all of this? His rise to prominence, along with his cozy relationship with the Trump administration, raises a lot of questions.
Like what? What are you thinking about?
Let's start with Trump's idea
Okay.
of replacing the air traffic control system
Right.
and possibly handing it over to one of Musk's companies.
And then there's Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy
Yeah.
announcing that Musk's DOGE team,
Right.
referring to Dogecoin,
Right.
the cryptocurrency Musk heavily promotes, will be involved in upgrading the aviation system.
This is all coming right after Hillary Clinton's criticisms of Majie's aviation
What?
policies and those recent fatal crashes. Not exactly a vote of confidence.
Not really.
And let's not forget about Tesla's high fatal accident rate and that SpaceX rocket explosion over the Caribbean.
It does make you wonder
Yeah.
about his reliability when it comes to handling critical infrastructure.
Especially with someone like Marco Elez,
Yeah.
one of Musk's young engineers, resigning after being linked to social media posts promoting racism and eugenics. So we've got manipulation of information, erosion of trust, weakening of safeguards, and questionable alliances.
It's a lot.
Where does all of this lead?
That's what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll examine the pushback against these trends and what individuals can actually do to navigate this increasingly complex information landscape.
Okay, so we just went through like a pretty intense list of events and these concerning trends.
And that's a lot going on.
From manipulated ICE press releases to the dismantling of the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force. It kind of paints a rather bleak picture, doesn't it?
It does seem pretty overwhelming when you lay it all out like that.
So where do we even go from here? What can we, like, as individuals actually do in the face of this massive information war?
Well, the first step, and I think this is often the most difficult one, is acknowledging that we're all susceptible to misinformation.
Wait, you're saying that even the most, like, skeptical among us can fall prey to these tactics?
It might seem counterintuitive, but our brains are naturally wired to look for patterns and make connections.
Right.
And those who spread disinformation, they exploit that.
Yeah.
They weave these narratives that tap into our pre-existing beliefs
Yeah.
and our fears,
Mm-hmm.
making us more likely to accept information even if it's false.
So it's less about being gullible and more about understanding how our brains process information in the first place.
I think that's a really good way to put it.
So, like, awareness of our own biases is a good starting point then.
Precisely.
Right.
We need to ask ourselves, what am I predisposed to believe, even without evidence?
Okay.
What are my emotional triggers?
Yeah.
That might make me more susceptible to accepting something as true.
Okay.
You know,
So, step one, know thyself. What comes after that?
I think the next step is we need to develop a critical eye,
Okay.
what's often called media literacy. We have to become more discerning consumers of information,
Yeah.
regardless of where it comes from.
So, even if it's from, like, a source I generally trust.
Yeah, I mean, think about it.
Okay.
Even if it's coming from a source you trust, you still need to ask yourself some questions.
Okay. Like what?
Like, who's behind this information?
Right.
What's their agenda? What evidence do they have to back up their claims?
Yeah. Does this just confirm what I already believe, or is it challenging me to think differently?
That's a really crucial point.
Yeah.
We should always be wary of information that only reinforces our existing beliefs.
Okay.
I think real growth happens when we're confronted with information that pushes us outside of our comfort zones.
So it sounds like we're talking about actively engaging with the information we come across,
Yes.
not just passively absorbing it, right?
Exactly.
So like digging deeper, checking multiple sources, maybe even verifying things before I hit that share button on social media.
You've got it.
Okay.
It's a conscious effort for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the alternative is to basically be swept away by this tide of misinformation
Right.
and become a pawn in someone else's game.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to get a sense of like the responsibility that comes with staying informed these days.
Yeah.
It's not just a privilege.
Yeah.
It's an active role that we have to play
Right.
in protecting our own like understanding of the world.
It's a responsibility that's crucial for a functioning democracy.
Yeah.
And it's a responsibility that I think we all share.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense, but I have to admit it's a little overwhelming.
Sure, I get it.
Are there like any practical tips or tools that you recommend for actually putting media literacy into practice?
Sure. One really simple but powerful step is to diversify your media diet.
What do you mean?
Well, don't just rely on one or two sources for information.
Right.
Actively seek out different perspectives, even those you might disagree with.
So step out of my echo chamber right now. Expose myself to like viewpoints that might make me feel uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's in those spaces of discomfort that real learning and growth can occur.
Okay.
You can also utilize fact-checking websites
Uh-huh.
like Snopes, PolitiFact, factcheck.org, that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And learning to do reverse image searches can help you verify the authenticity of photos and videos.
Oh, that's a good tip. Okay, those are great resources. I'm starting to, like, feel a little bit more empowered.
Okay.
Like, I have some tools to fight back against this information onslaught.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's about fighting back.
Okay.
I think it's more about reclaiming our agency.
Yeah, okay.
Becoming more discerning and critical in how we approach information.
I like that. Empowerment, not combat.
Right.
But what about those who are already so deeply entrenched in these, like, disinformation bubbles?
Yeah.
How do we even begin to reach them?
That's a really tough one. Direct confrontation rarely works.
Okay.
It often just reinforces their beliefs and makes them dig in even deeper.
So yelling at my uncle about his Facebook posts is not the answer.
Probably not, no.
What is?
Well, instead of trying to, force feed them a different reality,
Yeah.
consider asking questions
Okay.
that gently challenge their assumptions. Encourage them to consider alternative perspectives.
So planting seeds of doubt rather than waging like an all-out argument.
Exactly. It's a subtle approach.
Okay.
It requires patience,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always yield immediate results.
Right.
But it's often the most effective way to create a space for dialogue
Yeah.
and potentially bridge the divide.
It feels like we're talking about like a much bigger shift here, a change in like how we approach conversations and disagreements in general.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's about fostering a culture of critical thinking
Right.
where we value evidence over emotion and are willing to engage with different viewpoints respectfully,
Yeah.
even when we disagree.
This has been like incredibly insightful. And I'm feeling honestly a glimmer of hope amidst all this chaos.
Yeah.
But I know we're not done yet, right? We've talked about like individual responsibility.
Yes.
But what about the like systemic level?
Right.
What can be done on a larger scale to combat the spread of misinformation and protect our institutions?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And one we'll dive into in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll examine the roles of government, tech companies, education, and civil society in addressing this challenge.
We've been unpacking this whole idea of an illusion of truth.
Right.
Looking how narratives are being shaped and, well, frankly, manipulated.
Yeah.
What that means for us as individuals trying to just make sense of the world.
Right.
We even explored some tools and strategies, to sharpen our critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
And navigate this increasingly complex information landscape.
And while individual responsibility is crucial, we can't ignore the systemic factors at play here. I think we need to address the spread of misinformation on a much larger scale.
Okay.
If we actually want to protect the very foundations of our democracy.
So how do we tackle a problem this big? It feels like we're up against some incredibly powerful forces.
Oh, for sure.
Like political agendas, social media algorithms that are designed to keep us hooked, even like foreign interference.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
I think the first step is acknowledging the gravity of the situation.
Okay.
This isn't just about fake news or internet trolls.
Right.
This is about a deliberate and coordinated assault on truth itself.
So we need to move beyond thinking of this as just a nuisance or an annoyance.
Yeah.
Recognize it as like a real threat to our democracy.
Exactly. And with that recognition comes the need, I think, for a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
One that involves governments, tech companies, educational institutions, civil society.
Working together.
All working together, yeah.
Let's break that down. Starting with the government. What can they actually do without, stepping on that very important line of free speech?
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
Yeah.
But there are steps, I think, that can be taken without infringing on those fundamental rights.
Like what?
For instance, strengthening campaign finance laws can help increase transparency in political advertising, making it harder for foreign entities to meddle in our elections.
So shining a light on where the money is coming from can expose like hidden agendas and potential manipulation.
Right.
What about supporting a public media and independent journalism?
Oh, yeah.
Those seem like crucial pieces of the puzzle as well.
Absolutely. Investing in quality journalism is like investing in a healthy democracy.
Okay.
These institutions play such a vital role in providing fact-based reporting and holding those in power accountable.
Okay, but what about those tech companies that often seem to be, part of the problem? They've been criticized for not doing enough to stop the spread of misinformation on their platforms.
Right.
What's their role in all of this?
They have a huge responsibility, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think we need more transparency from them
Okay.
in terms of how their algorithms work,
Yeah.
how they moderate content, and how they handle our data.
It's so easy to feel powerless against those algorithms, you
Yeah.
know? They create these echo chambers and filter bubbles
Right.
that trap us in our own biases and limit our exposure to different viewpoints.
And that's exactly where regulation comes in.
Okay.
I think we need stronger safeguards to prevent the spread of harmful content,
Like what?
like hate speech, incitements to violence,
Yeah.
while still upholding freedom of expression.
So it's about finding that balance between freedom and responsibility.
I think so, yeah.
It sounds like education plays a crucial role here as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Can't we equip people with the critical thinking skills they need to sift through all this information?
We can. And I think media literacy should be a core part of education,
Okay.
starting at a young age.
Uh-huh.
We need to teach people how to evaluate sources, how to identify bias, and how to think critically about the information they encounter,
Okay.
both online and offline.
So, like, giving people the mental tools they need to become, like, savvy information consumers.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
really understand what they're reading, what they're sharing.
Right.
But education takes time.
It does.
And it feels like we need, like, solutions now.
I hear you.
What about those grassroots organizations and community groups? Can they play a part in all of this?
They're absolutely vital.
Okay.
We need more fact-checking initiatives at the local level, more community-based media literacy programs,
Yeah.
more spaces where people can actually come together and have these open and honest conversations about these issues.
So it's about, like, empowering people to become more discerning and engaged citizens in their own communities.
Yeah, I think so.
It sounds like there's no single magic bullet solution here.
No.
It's like a collective effort involving, everyone.
That makes all of us, right?
Governments, tech companies, educators, journalists, and, everyday citizens working together to protect our shared reality.
Because as we've seen, the consequences of doing nothing are just too dangerous to ignore.
This isn't about, like, winning an argument or proving someone wrong.
Right.
It's about safeguarding the very foundation of our democracy.
It's about ensuring that truth, evidence, and reason have a fighting chance in a world increasingly flooded with misinformation.
Well, that's the challenge before us, and it's a challenge we must meet head-on with courage, with clarity, and a steadfast commitment to the truth.
Oh, sure.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful and honestly a bit unnerving at times.
Yeah, I get it.
But I also feel this sense of hope,
Good.
this sense that we're not powerless in the face of this information war.
That's the key takeaway. We all have a role to play in shaping the information landscape, and the future of our democracy may very well depend on it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little inspiring.
And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed.
And remember, the truth is out there. It's up to all of us to find it, protect it, and share it.